Hello. Salam, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hey, Selma. How are you?
Hello.
Hey,
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Alhamdulillah. Can I tell you, I was trying to be fancy and do the live stream from my PC, and it was just
Yeah,
not working.
yeah,
I just had to give up at the end of it.
yeah. It just as long as it's functional and it provides the information, that's all that matters.
Exactly.
We don't have to be fancy. Yeah.
Exactly. I am so happy to have you. I know it's been a
Yep.
while since we had a chance to talk.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I'm very excited about this conversation today
Okay.
and
Likewise.
very excited to, yeah, and very excited to just like educate everyone. So I want to take a minute and have you introduce yourself to
Mm.
everyone who is online and who's going to be listening in later on.
Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Mohammed, and I'm the founder and director of the Philo Charity in Sudan. Uh, I think that's about it. I don't
No,
know.
there's so much more to you than
Yeah,
just that. Come on now.
I'm a doctor by practice, and
Not for
I'm
yourself.
yeah, and I'm a researcher by current profession. So yeah, that, I think yeah, that's good. That's more than enough.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So how about this then? How about you tell us a little bit about who Philahart
hmm
is, what you guys have been doing. Oh, Tartula's here with us. Salam,
hmm
Tartula. But can you tell us a bit about Philahart and what you've created and what it's even here for?
Yeah. Sure. Philohite is our little baby, me and many of the team with us is that are still with us in Philohite at the moment. We started in 2019. Our main focus was to provide was to renov. It was an interesting idea at the time because no one was sort of putting a lot of attention on orphans in Sudan, and that is where we wanted to focus. We um, put a lot of attention and a lot of focus on what was happening in the orphanages in Sudan. It's an area that I worked in even before Philahart, and I was always interested in.
Mm.
And so we started working on renovating orphanages across the country. Our main project was the Mygoma orphanage.
Mm.
We were focused on reducing the mortality rate, which was really high. And the mortality rate was
So
more,
what was it? Yeah.
yeah, the the main cause for that at the time was the environmental conditions that the orphans were living in at that point in time. And so we started by improving the sanitary conditions, building new rooms, renovating the old ones, improving lighting, improving ventilation, da 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 da. And by the time we were forced to stop working in the orphanage during our first stint there, the mortality has dropped from 30 and 40 kids per month to 3 per month. And that was in the span of 6 months
Oh, mashallah.
of
Wow.
intensive work
Mashallah.
in the orphanage. Yeah. And then from that, we moved into community-based project that coincided with the it was exactly the same point in time when COVID started, and there was
Mm.
a huge gap and a huge need for entities to work with the families on the ground, provide medical supplies, provide financial aid, provide, for example, food substances to the families that live on a day-to-day sort of basis.
Mm.
And that is how it started. That is how that was, I think, our like first community-based project. And then from that we expanded. From that we realized that we have a lot of potential. We have a huge team,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone is very motivated at the time. So why not? Let's grow. Let's do
Let's do
something more.
it. Yeah.
And that's when we started doing activities um, for example, with young girls in impoverished communities. When we started, for example, providing small businesses to impoverished families to help them
MashaAllah.
sustain themselves on the long run. And that is also like when we started working more with the orphans. We went back to the orphanage and started working more with the orphans to now you are alive, but that is the bare minimum. Now we want to have,
Mm-hmm.
a child-friendly environment, and that's when we started building playgrounds and building child-friendly
Oh,
environments where those kids can have actually can fully like can reach their full potential as children, and then from that we also did a lot of emergency response projects. Uh, One was during the flooding of 2020, if I remember correctly.
mm.
It's been a
Oh
while now.
yeah.
Yeah, and we have been and again, like one thing that I really like love and appreciate about Filahat is the fact that we're very innovative.
Mm.
So
So what does that mean? So what makes Philheart different from any of the other orgs?
yeah, like look, obviously we come from an interesting mix of backgrounds in Filahat. Like some of us are doctors, some of us are engineers, some of us are still students, some of us are architects, and so on and so forth. And when I say that we are very innovative is I mean, look, for example, there's a flood. Everyone is thinking tents, food, this.
Mm,
But our first thought was, okay, because of because there are a lot of doctors in Filahai, we know that, okay, there will be XYZ
mm,
consequences to this flood.
mm,
And from a health perspective. So how can we try and get ahead of it? Because when you have, for example,
mm.
diarrheal diseases, it doesn't matter how much food you give those people. It's going to be
Yeah,
pointless.
it's not
Eh,
addressing the issue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then that becomes a bigger issue because it's infectious. So within days, the entire camp is going to be
Yeah.
dehydrated, and and that's the worst thing they can have. Like you can give them all the tents, but they will still be sick. And then you will go into
Mm,
additional cost of, we need to now bring medicine. We need to now, for example, do this, and that. So that was like, okay, how do we prevent that? And then the other elements in Filahat came up with the idea of mobile toilets. What if we,
wow.
like dig up
Okay.
like certain sized holes, install, for example, like makeshift toilets for all of these people and
Okay,
for
so
all
I'm
of
gonna
these camps.
interrupt you
Go
and
ahead.
I'm gonna just say my biggest
Hmm.
nightmare every time I used to go back home was the bathrooms.
I see, like you can already like.
Listen, the biggest nightmare was the bathroom. So for those of you who don't know, so like, my family's not very rich back home.
Mhm.
Like, alhamdulillah, because we were in the West, we were able to like send money and so things were able to upgrade.
Right,
But if none of us went to the West, I would probably be one of the people who needed your help right now.
probably.
Like real talk, yeah. And so every
Yeah.
time I used to go back when I was like younger, it's a hole in the ground.
Hmm.
Like that's what you get,
Yep.
a dugout giant hole in the ground, and the stuff that would come out of it, the critters that would come out of it, like oh my god, like I still had
I mean,
nightmares and I would used to
makes
make
it makes going to the toilet interesting though, don't you think? Like
it makes
it
it
has
a
a lot of
nightmare.
activities. Your heart is always
No, I don't
racing. You don't know what's gonna
I
come out
don't
of the
I
hole. Like,
don't want that. No, I don't want that. Like I used to make one of my aunts like go in the bathroom first, make sure everything was good, and I would just stand outside waiting,
yeah,
squeezing
but
in, and then look.
I'm telling you, still, it's an experience, and it's an
Yeah, a
exercise.
lot.
Yeah, like you're doing
It's
cardio
one I
even
don't need.
even when you're going
Nah,
to
I'm
the
good.
toilet. So
Okay, but
yeah,
there's cardio and then there's a heart attack, so there's a little bit of a difference.
yeah, both are interesting. You know?
But that's amazing.
But yeah,
And
like
what
that
I'm
was,
hearing and what I'm getting from you is in terms of that ingenuity, it's really about like predicting and being ahead of
yeah,
things and not just being so
yeah,
reactionary because
yeah,
disasters are going to happen, like we know those are going to
yeah,
happen, and we know what's going to be provided
yeah,
like the first thought,
yeah,
but you're taking it like 10 steps down the road.
yeah, yeah. And that is like sort of our modus operandi ever since. We have been, we, we've always been thinking that way because, for example, we know that there are things that are attractive to the donors, but if it doesn't align with what we think is the right thing to do and what we know is the right thing to do, it makes no sense for us to do it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like right now, for example, with the war in Sudan and stuff, I can I can say with the funds that we have collected, we could have almost opened a little hospital somewhere. But
Mm-hmm.
how many people is that going to be useful to? And I know
Yeah.
entities that went in that direction. How many people is that going to really benefit? Like there's an infrastructure for health. It's not functioning well at the moment, but it is there for a reason. It's accessible, people
Mm-hmm.
know it, the facility is there, so you're not going to waste your money on bricks and cement and paint and
Yeah.
whatever. You're going to just get the medicine or do, for example, like in some areas at some point we created makeshift clinics, you know, like we
Mm-hmm.
would like make a clinic in someone's house, and when that clinic is about to, you know, get like recognized or like get identified by RSF,
Mm-hmm.
we would just change it to another house at the other end of the neighborhood. And so
Okay.
like it's genuinely like our whole idea, and I worked extensively in the humanitarian sector, and this is where like where I think that Philohite is different, is that we are adaptive, we are innovative at the same time, you know, where we make
Mm-hmm.
the, for example, the makeshift clinic, and we understand in our planning also that at any point it can get raided. So what's plan B? What's
Mm-hmm.
plan C? What's plan D? And so on and so forth, you know? And you would be amazed, for example, like by the amount of work that we are able to do in Sudan and in Egypt, and we're looking into like ways to support people in other areas now in various parts of Sudan that we haven't been able to operate in before, with very limited resources, very limited budgets, and even very limited human capacity. Like we're at the
Mm-hmm.
moment, I can count the team on my hands, you know, but that team
Oh,
is
yeah.
able to,
And I'm sure each one of them is burnt out, but still
yeah,
going.
yeah. And I mean, that is part of it, you know, like it's about also recognizing the bigger picture. But yeah, we can get into that later. But yeah, it's also like I I think it's obvious I'm slightly over passionate about Fedahar, but yeah,
I don't know if there's a way to be over passionate about the survival of your people. So,
fair enough.
like,
You know?
humanity and all of that fun
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
But I find it very interesting when I asked you to introduce yourself, you gave me like not even one sentence. But when I asked you about
yeah,
Philahart, like you were able to
yeah.
go on. So,
That's my
mashallah.
that's our, as I said, that's our little baby, me and
I
so
love
many
it.
others. So yeah,
I love it. SubhanAllah. And so I know there's like several questions that I have in my mind that I kind of want to unpack with you.
okay,
But before I do, I just want to note to the people who are tuning in, like I saw a few questions that were popping up. If you can please use the little bubble question thing at the bottom so it's saved, and then we'll do the Q&A after. Otherwise, by the time I see your message and get to ask it, it's like gone. But with that being said, no, I know for me, like I think it was when maybe I was like 15 or 16, um, and we were in Khartoum, and I just remember all of the children on the streets,
yeah,
right? And I couldn't understand why there were so many
yeah,
because it wasn't really making sense to me. I'm just like, okay, we're a Muslim country, we're this, we're that, like
yeah,
like having orphans on the street, like I'm like, yo, that's haram on us. Like how is that even really possible?
Mm,
Right? So let's first start with the orphans because I know a lot of people like have questions about that. Who are the orphans and how did Sudan even get into a space and place where there were so many on the streets and what's going on with them now?
yeah,
Because I haven't gotten enough, like, I know the work that you're
yeah.
doing, but again, like, I remember the ones who are on the street, so I don't know. I haven't been able to find like a really accurate update on what's going on with that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take it to the. I'm gonna take you down a little bit in history and then come back to where we are right now and why we in Shilaha decided to work with orphans in the first place. Okay, so if you go back in Sudan's history, a lot of dark spots in Sudan's history, but one of the darkest was in around the 1970s, mm, like mid 1970s, and that is when one of the regimes that were ruling Sudan at the time started recruiting orphans into security forces with the rationale that they have hatred towards the society. Okay?
Wow.
That would just keep that in mind, okay? That rationale is valid and it's true. It's not like they just came up with this crazy theory. No, it's actually true
Mm-hmm.
because the Sudanese society stigmatized the orphans. They pushed them to the fringes of society
Mm-hmm.
to the point where, okay, if I get a weapon and I have food and this person is providing me with da 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 da, who is my enemy? Who is my first enemy? Who is the person
Mm,
that shunned me? Is the person that pushed me to the brink? Is the person that pushed me to the side of society?
absolutely.
Okay, so keep that in mind. Okay, and then throughout the decades, this was still ongoing. No one cares because, and excuse my French here, but what haram?
I know, yeah, no,
Yeah,
and that was
yeah,
again the shocker for
yeah,
me
yeah,
because
exactly.
like I
That is the
left when I was
mentality.
like 4 or 5.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
is the mentality in Sudan. So people are constantly thinking that, the society, even though there are really nice people that would give them food or blah blah blah, but it's still a stigma. Extramarital
Hmm.
relationship, this kid is, like so impure, like or the result of something
Yep.
filthy or whatever,
Hmm.
you know, and like the end result, okay, you can condemn the act itself, but you don't have to condemn the kid. Like the
Exactly.
it's not the
It's two
kid's fault.
separate things.
Exactly.
Two separate things.
And
Yeah.
this is not the kid's fault. This is not the child's fault. It has nothing to do with him. Like he didn't play any role in this happening.
Hmm.
So these kids ended up, being pushed to the side of society until literally our day, like until the day that we are living in right now. And that is why, to a lot of people, when we started, it's stupid. What the hell are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
what the flip? What are you trying to do for these kids? It's pointless. Like, you shouldn't be like
For
doing
what?
that. Like,
For
if
what? Like,
yeah,
why are
like
you wasting?
go
Why are you
help.
wasting?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go help your family instead. Like you sure have a distant cousin who needs help
Oh
more than
my
these
God.
kids, and so
I
on and
get
so
that
forth.
excuse all the
Yeah, and
time.
so
All
on.
the time I get that same
Yeah,
excuses.
and so on and so forth. And this kept on happening. It kept on going on, and it reached the point where Al Maigoma Orphanage was was a sort of by like in 2019 when we were working there, Al Maigoma Orphanage was sort of it's an I don't know how to even put it, but it's a dead end for a lot of these kids in more ways
Mm,
than one. Like these kids would go, for example, in there, they would die like in a
yeah.
month or two. I worked in the admissions clinic for a little bit, when I was in med school for like I used to volunteer there sometimes, and kids would die on a daily basis. Kids
Yeah.
would die, you know, almost like to a point where you can't even count them, you know. To
Hmm.
and all of these kids are nameless,
Yeah.
and that is the worst part of it, is that you're trying to save this kid's life. You're sending it to the hospital, in the hospital as a little baby, like at 2 days old or a day old. They're not given the needed attention because they're being sent from the orphanage. So, like,
Nobody
okay,
cares.
yeah, so a little bit, just put them on the side. We're gonna take care of that later. So things kept on like, and that was like why we were really passionate about doing something about it. So
Hmm.
keeping in mind that that was happening until 2019. In 2019 itself, when we started Philahide, I'm telling you, we probably needed less people than the people we were getting. But our
Mm.
idea, our big vision was a lot bigger than the project itself. It was to try
Present.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
expose people to the reality that is happening there. You know, so many people have never been there, and my Goma orphanage is not in a far cut off location. No, it's
Mm.
literally in the middle of Khartoum. So it's not that far away. It's not that like
Mm.
I'm telling you, it's literally in the middle of Khartoum. Like you can drive to it in less than 10, 15 minutes from anywhere, you know, you are in Khartoum. And the idea was, okay, if all these people come in here, they don't necessarily have to do anything. They don't necessarily like we probably don't need them. And I'm telling you, at some point we were spending from our own money just to get like, for example, extra paint or stuff, just to get people, you know, like
Mm.
participating in
Yeah.
something. Okay, go paint
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
wall, you
Yeah.
know? And the idea is to simply like, okay, I want to expose as many people as possible. I want to show people what is happening in the orphanage, and that's it. Literally, like that was it.
Hmm.
Like we don't want anything else. And that got people talking. That got the Mygoma more exposure. It even got it more help. It put it on the map. A lot of organizations were then like interested in actually working with them,
Mm.
including some international organizations like MSF and so on and so forth.
Mm.
So for us, that was like the bigger, like that was the big achievement of all of
Yeah.
the work that we have done. And if that help remove the stigma that is surrounding these orphans, that is surrounding the whole situation for the orphanages and for the orphans in the country, then yeah, that's enough. If it changed for 10, 15 people, yeah, cool.
Yeah.
That's more than enough. You know,
Yeah.
that's more than enough. And that was how we, yeah, that was how we saw it, and yeah, how
I
it
love
went
that.
down.
So I'm gonna add a couple of things because I want to give like more context to the folks who are gonna be listening and who are listening. And I'll share a little bit, even just like about my experience, just to bring it home. I remember when I first went um, back to Sudan in my youth, and when you're talking about like that cultural stigma, like I remember asking. So this was like before the 15. So I remember asking. I'm just like what's why are these children out in the streets? And they were the haram, right? Like that's how it was framed to me, um, and that I had to stay away from them because they would get me sick and they would
Yeah,
X Y Z, whatever it was, and that was even from like my own family.
yeah,
And even at that age, it didn't really make sense to me because I'm just like, this kid is younger than me. Like, what are you
no,
talking about? Like, what did they do? Like, and I wanted to know, like, what did they do?
no,
And no one had any real answers for me. And one of the things that I'm like super ashamed about, and this happened when I was maybe like 12, 13, and there were two things that I saw that made me just want to emotionally shut down.
hmm,
And while here in the West, it's been completely eradicated, polio is still very rampant
yeah,
and very present amongst the orphans.
mhm,
And I didn't fully click with that. And so I remember being in Sugan and this young boy, probably around my age, like he had his shoes on his hands so he could get around
yeah,
because below the torso everything was removed.
mm,
And then there was another incident of seeing someone drinking water from spillage
yeah,
because no one would give them cup or anything like that. Because like you go
yeah,
Sugundarman, they have the guys holding on to the cups, and everyone's like, no one was gonna give them that, right?
yeah,
And, and I know for me, it was just so overwhelming, right? Especially having
yeah,
had like gone away and come back. It was so
yeah,
overwhelming
yeah,
that I just shut
yeah,
down and I didn't want to see it anymore. Right? It was too much.
yeah, 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 fair enough. And that is the day-to-day life for so many people. You don't even understand.
Yeah.
Like we worked with families in Mayu that don't even have pipes in their house. Like they don't even have like tabs in the house. They've never even seen stuff like that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's genuinely crazy like that. You know, Mayu is just to emphasize on the point you mentioned, okay? So there's this saying is that like you don't see the world through your car window.
Mm-mm.
You cannot see the reality through your car window, and that is the very true in Sudan because A, there's a huge gap between those who have and those who don't, and
Mm-hmm.
B, those who don't are shunned like any other city, like they're shunned to the
Mm-hmm.
sides of the city. And if you go, for example, to Mayo, which is again inside Khartoum, it's not far from Khartoum. If you go there, people are eating scraps, people are
Mm-hmm.
living in makeshift houses in a lot of parts of Mayo, and there are some parts that are actually proper like neighborhoods, but for the most part, it's actually makeshift houses. It's a really dangerous environment. It's a very like it's genuinely like if you go to Mayo, you step back at least 50, 60 years, you know,
Mm.
in Sudan's history. And Sudan is already like 50, 60 years behind.
Behind, yeah.
Yeah. So you're stepping into a whole other like a whole other century if when you go there. You know, people don't get water in a tap. No, what the hell is that? Like you take a
Mm-hmm.
bucket, you go to the
Yeah.
whatever, or like a donkey brings it on. It's interesting.
Oh, I remember them.
Yeah, and people don't, and
Yeah.
people just seem to like brush that aside, you know, like the
Mm-hmm.
struggle is the struggle of those who can speak about it. And that
Mm-hmm.
is, you know, for a lot of reasons why when the revolution happened, who do you know of the martyrs?
Mm.
You know? You know those who have people on social media to talk about them. You know those who are well off or have friends abroad or blah, 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 you know?
Yeah.
But you really don't know how many people died. In 2013, there was like a big spark for revolution in 2013, and no one ever speaks about that for one simple
Yeah.
reason. The people that went out were from lower classes. They were going out because the prices of fuel were increasing and the prices of bread were increasing. So people went out in masses and they were killed in masses. Like hundreds and hundreds of people. I'm telling you, in 2013, the amount of people that died then were a lot more than the amount of people that died in 2019. You know?
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
came after
Exactly.
everything. Yeah.
Exactly. So even within our society, you notice that in terms of even like the most prized thing that we have, the revolution, da da da. Like even
Mm,
that, when you really, really, really sit down and break it down, it actually is a very classist movement, you know, like a lot of things are very wrong with the fundamentals of it. And that is why we are here today,
mm,
because the
mm.
elites in society have made it to the top using the revolution as an excuse. And now here we are. You know, they are the
Yeah,
politicians that represent us. And they are the ones that are shaking the hands of those who are killing the people in Sudan, and they are the
everyone
ones that
else.
are, yeah, they are the ones that are going to Paris to decide our future, uh,
Yeah.
more and more. So it's it's
Hmm.
it's actually really,
With the
really screwed
full
up.
vested interest in themselves, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and that's what it is. So what's happening today with the orphans? Because again, like I haven't really gotten much of an update. Like I've been
Sure.
following what you're doing and the ones that are under your care, but have you
Yeah,
been
no,
hearing anything?
the situation is really bad. The orphans have been moved to different locations. A lot of them are in Port Sudan, others are elsewhere, scattered. Some are in Sinnar on their
Mm,
way to Port Sudan
mm-hmm.
eventually one day. Some are um, on the edge of Al Jazeera state. Some are in different, like, so right now, like, it's really difficult to like keep track of where everyone is. In terms of focusing specifically on my Goma, which is like the biggest orphanage and was housing the majority of the orphans in the country. But also, now we are struggling to provide them with sustainable food,
Mm.
on a monthly basis or every 2 months or whatever. That is really difficult at the moment. Um, the mortality rates are like, obviously no one cared about it when everything was good.
Yeah,
So
when it
no
was,
one is gonna care about it at the moment. We can say numbers and no one's gonna, that's probably not gonna move a lot of people, but it's on the rise again, if that makes a difference. And yeah, and like, again, in the middle of all of the issues that are happening, and even within our own projects that we're doing in the country and stuff, it's it gets lost in the middle of all of the things that are happening. And yeah, it's a relatively tiny issue in the grand scheme of things, but it's not tiny for those who are living it. Do you get me?
well, no, and I think the biggest thing that I've like really tried to like embody and live by is the status of the most vulnerable is the benchmark of how we need to measure
Oh,
things. So if the most vulnerable, their own
good.
passing is irrelevant to everyone else,
Okay.
then no matter what else is going on, we're doing a terrible job. Like we're doing a horrible
Yeah.
job. Um, like that's the benchmark. Like
Mhm.
that's where we have to always look
Yeah.
first. Because here's the thing: like if we were to take care of them, there's no way that wouldn't automatically like trickle down to everything else. So if the most
Fair
vulnerable
enough.
are cared for,
Yeah.
right? For me, they're the first domino,
Yeah.
right? The ones who have the most to lose and the least resources to enact any
Mm.
impact and change.
But this is this
And
is this is exactly why I'm saying, like, what's happening with everything that's happening in Sudan right now, it's really difficult to say they are the ones that are the most vulnerable. This is exactly
mm,
what I'm saying is, okay, so picture this, okay? You have women who are survivors of gender-based violence, just to keep the terminology
mhm.
good. You have elderly who are dying because of lack of, one example,
Everything.
one
Yeah.
simple example, dialysis kits.
Mm,
You have kids dying from scorpion bites, IDPs, like internally displaced populations living in makeshift houses and stuff that are dying from scorpion stings and snake bites because there is no antivenom available. in the locations that they are in. And you have people dying from hunger
Mm-hmm.
because they don't have access to food supplies. So in the just like, and again, there are so many other issues. And I currently
Mm-hmm.
work within the humanitarian sector outside of my work in Philahat.
Mm-hmm.
And my work involves research, and my work involves understanding all of these nuances to the situation in Sudan. So, can you say, out of all these people, who is more important?
Oh, it's not about who's more important.
No, no.
And
Yeah,
that's why I
yeah.
say, for
Who
me, I
is
say
the
the
most
most
vulnerable?
vulnerable.
Who is the most
Yeah,
vulnerable?
but here's the thing though, why does the most vulnerable have to be identified in that particular kind of way?
No, no,
Right?
because but no, because like
And
look, okay, okay. In terms of okay, I'm someone who's working on the ground. My whole
mm,
role is to okay, I need to allocate this dollar to the most
just
important thing,
someone.
to the most
Mm.
important thing right now. Like, how do I allocate that? Is it
And
to
this
the
is why I don't do your job because I have
exactly,
no capacity
exactly?
to
But this is
choose that.
exactly, and this is why I'm saying like why I'm emphasizing this question because it is the reality for everyone
Mm,
who's working on the ground, whether it's Filahat
yeah.
or any other organization. It's like we have $20, let's say, and we have families that we are housing in Egypt that were kicked out of their homes. So they're going to be sleeping in the street. We have families in Sudan that need food supply. We have the orphans that need monthly support. We have the hospitals that need equipment and that need, for example, materials to continue operating. And we have antivenoms that we need to buy for like 10, 15 villages.
Mm,
Who is getting the $20 first? Because all of them can die at like any given point in time. You can't actually say, oh, like these people will probably be okay for a little. No, no.
mm.
And the stakes are not comfort and discomfort.
It's life and death.
It's life and death.
Yeah.
Do you get me?
Yeah.
So with that measure, with that thing in mind, how 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 do how do you like choose? How do you make the decision? How do you say, um, I'm gonna allocate this money here because here it's gonna have the most impact? Probably no, you never know, you know, and that is the gamble that we have to
Mm,
take every time. Is we try to take we call it calculated risks,
mm,
you know,
mm.
even with the charity work, it's calculated risk because at the end of the day, what am I going to show the donor? Like the person who donated $1 or two or three, what am I going to show for my work? Is it better to get, for example, two monitors, give them to this hospital, and that way we will sustain them for months? Or is it better to take the money, take the money that we were going to spend on these, for example, like monitors and spend it on uh, food for this family or spend it on
Mm,
antivenoms that can potentially prevent the death of kids, elderly, women, men, blah, blah, blah. Did you get me? So in 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 a lot of like this is again, this is the daily question that we have to ask ourselves is what is more important? What is the most important place we
mm,
need to put this single dollar into to make the most impact? And again, as Philohite, as I said, like we are always trying to go out of our way to be creative about the solutions,
mm.
but simply that is not the case all the time. You get
Yeah.
me? Sometimes, you know, we have to like sometimes you have to be traditional. I need to just buy equipment. I need to give this equipment to this hospital. Sometimes we can be a little bit creative and create makeshift clinics here and there and here and there. Sometimes we can't do either. So we try to find
Mm,
a third option, maybe a cash transfer for families stuck in Omdurman or trying to evacuate or blah
mm,
blah blah. And so in a lot of ways, it's a like it's a very tricky balance that we have to have between what we are able to do versus what our donors are expecting from us versus what
mm.
really needs to be done versus it's it's a it's a crazy time to be working in this sector and it's a crazy time to try be working in Sudan as well, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So that gives me two questions, and I'll ask them separately. But the first question that's kind of like coming to my mind, and you touched on this earlier,
Yeah,
it's like what's attractive to the donor,
yeah.
right? So there's it definitely, I don't want to say politics, but there's definitely something going on there with that. And so what are you finding that people who are donating are gravitating towards, and what's your ask of them when there's all these other things that also need attention?
Um, okay, so if I understand you correctly, you want me to talk about what I think is actually the important thing versus what I think people
No.
think is important in a way, right?
So what are the donors
Mm-hmm.
responding to more?
Okay.
And if and so if the donors are primarily responding to, like, let's say orphans,
Sure.
because everyone loves kids, and like people will always like put
Yeah.
money into that. But then there's the anti-venom, then there's the food, then there's the,
Mm,
refugees, and then there's the internally displaced. And so how do we expand people's eyes and minds so that when you're making a call for people to donate, we don't have to depend so heavily on just what's going to get the attention.
okay. Look, the thing about what's happening in Sudan, it's I would say it's lack of political will, for lack of better term.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, in order for you to make any significant sort of change, you have to generate the political will among the people that you're talking to for them to want to help with that issue.
Mm.
And that was cool at some point. That was because Sudan was the trending thing at some point. And as sad as it is, I'm telling you, as sad as it is, it's just the reality.
Mm.
Sudan was the focal point for the whole world for like 5 minutes, but yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
the revolution, the Kandaka, it was all
exactly.
everywhere, and then it went. Yeah.
And then it died down. And then after the war started, a month, I would say, 1 month into the war, it started dying out. It started
Oh
dying
yeah.
down. No news channel is talking about it. Even within the Sudanese people themselves. And again, this is not blaming anyone, but this is just stating facts. The Sudanese community itself is, I have a feeling, okay, so the way I'm gonna put this is in the most PC way I can put it. But we as Sudanese people, we are adaptive. Okay? خلاص
Yep.
قامت حرب مرقنا, we went to another country or we went
Yep.
to a safer location and stuff. Life goes on. خلاص, screw it. I got my family out, you got your family out. خلاص الله كريم, ما نعمل شنو يعني, خلاص
Mm.
مش انتم بخير الحمد لله, الباقي ولا ما مشكلة. And that is the sort of mentality that we have. We never go back throughout Sudan's history and tell me, like, how many times did the Sudanese people come together, ignoring their ethnic differences, ignoring all of these
Mm.
economic differences, and decided to, okay, we're just going to be, united for a single cause. It
Yep.
literally, if you go back in Sudan's history, you will find that it's intervals. Same as with the revolution. It was an interval in Sudan's history. Right after its end, people are back calling each other names. People are back like, oh, divided. Yeah, you're from there.
Oh
I'm
my
from
God.
here. You're from there.
Thank
So
you so much for
yeah,
saying that. And I'm not going to be as nice as you because you're actually being really nice to the diaspora, especially. And I'm just going to call bullshit. And I am going to name the self centeredness that's been going on because it really has been. If my people, my tribe are okay, then
yeah,
khalas. Because there is this, and I think part of it has to do with, well, okay, if nobody cares about us, I have limited capacity, so I'm only going to care about what I can care about.
yeah,
And everything else can just figure itself
Yeah,
out, like every man for themselves type of mentality,
yeah,
right? That is the exact reason why we keep
yeah,
playing this pattern,
yeah, yeah. And I'm
right?
telling you,
And
that is a big reason for, and
100%.
that is the main thing I'm talking about, is that you cannot generate enough political will in the communities or in the Sudanese people, both outside, close, in the West, in the wherever you
Mm-hmm,
want to talk about it, whether it's the diaspora, whether it's the
mm-hmm,
recently removed, like, and moved
mm-hmm.
populations and so on and so forth. You cannot generate enough political will because of that, because of the people, you know, like, ah, alas, my people are okay.
Okay, so I have my
Yeah.
suspicions on why that's happening. Why do you think that's happening?
Mm-hmm. What is your,
No, I want to hear yours first.
no, why I think that is happening?
Yeah. Well, yeah. What is it that's keeping us so like just focused on the things that directly impact our family and not the entire community in Sudan?
We're hypocrites. That's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Throughout the history, those who had money have always abused those who don't. And so that's one way to look at it. Another way
Mm-hmm.
is the fact that we are. Remember what I said earlier about things being cool for a little bit and stuff? Just you've been living in the West your whole life, okay? How many Sudani people do you know prior to the 2018-19 revolution who was talking about their heritage and saying that I am a Terhaqa and my grandmother is Kandaka, and then who
Mm-hmm.
was saying that? Genuinely, who was saying that? And it's look, it's not necessarily a bad thing that people have recognized that afterwards. But if you recognize that and it's cool for you now and you're famous because of that, then freaking own that title. Stick to it,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
own it. You know, you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna say you're a Kandaka every time someone is trying to talk to you. Okay, cool. Yes, you are. No one is denying that.
Then
Yeah,
own all of it,
but own all of
including
it.
the responsibilities.
Exactly, including the responsibilities, and the responsibilities include talking about Sudan. I didn't ask you to do much. I'm not asking you to donate, but if you talk about the issue enough, it will be loud enough. If you
Mm-hmm.
talk about the issue enough, someone else is going to donate. You don't necessarily
Yeah.
have to donate yourself, but simply people don't see Sudan like that.
Yeah.
Simply people go go to Egypt, ask an Egyptian person, like go to an Egyptian person and say, "Screw your mom," and he might take that. No, he might take that. He might be, ah, cool, good, screw yours as well.
Oh, the
But
second you
thank
mentioned
you.
Egypt,
But then,
Umazonia?
because exactly, yeah. But the second you mention Egypt, ah, no, that's the red line. We're gonna
Mm-hmm.
now go into war.
Yeah.
Look at how things are handled in, like, among the Sudanese diaspora versus
Mm-hmm.
other diaspora, you know?
Mm-hmm.
As I said, I'm telling you, if you are trying to be, I'm not asking anyone again, I'm not trying to shame people into action, but if you are trying to take action and you feel that you're stuck with all these initiatives that are happening, and I'm not saying just Filahad, but you can also go check Barana Hanabniya, you can go check Sudani Nubi Youth. There are so
Mm-hmm.
many, like there's the Cairo Sudan Aid.
Yeah.
There are so many initiatives. And if you still feel that you don't know how to help and who to help and what to
You,
do and
you
blah, blah,
don't
blah,
want to.
so that is why I don't want to. Okay, then probably you just don't want to. That's one reason.
Mm-hmm.
That's one factor into why. Another factor is, especially when it comes to, for example, donation, is the donor fatigue that happens after a while. I've been donating for 11 months.
Mm.
Nothing significant is changing. The war is not stopping. Okay, khalas. So that is another factor. And a third factor is simply it's too much, you know?
Mm.
Like it is really, at some point, it is just genuinely too much for a lot of people to take. Like part of my job is like I do a lot of context monitoring and stuff. And I'm telling you, at some point, just exposure to news, not even videos or photos or anything
Mm-hmm.
gruesome, just exposure to the news itself
Mm-hmm.
is also really difficult. So a lot of people would close down to protect their mental health, and that is fair enough. But we
Mm-hmm.
can't all close down and all have donor fatigue and all, like,
Mm-hmm.
and that is why it went quiet because no one's talking about it.
Yep.
Go through your stories, see how many Sudanese person is
Trust
talking
me.
about it.
Trust me.
Thank you.
Oh, trust me. I know. I
Yeah,
know. I know.
yeah,
I know. And
yeah.
beautiful insight. I'm
So
gonna
that is why I
add a
think, yeah,
yeah. I'm gonna add a little bit of my take,
yeah,
and I think it for me. I developed my take even when I was younger. So me and my siblings, we have like a really big age gap because
yeah.
I don't know, they went on vacation and decided to have
Mm-hmm.
a whole bunch of babies after, right? So here I am as a teenager with these little babies that, I'm the oldest girl, so you know
Yeah.
what that means, mommy number two.
Mm-hmm.
And I love my sisters and my brothers, and I wanted to give them everything I didn't have because now we were at least in a space and place where we
Yeah.
could do things, right?
Yeah.
And, and I grew up a little bit different,
Mm-hmm.
very like close to the East community, because I came with one of the first
Mm-hmm.
waves of refugees from Bashir in the 90s and whatnot. And I remember even we had like Halloween. For Halloween, I would go as Arusa. Like my mom would
Mm-hmm.
even do my henna and stuff like that. Like that's how I showed
Yeah.
up to Halloween. At lunch, I would come with kisra and weka and all
Mm-hmm.
of that, and that's what I ate
Yep.
during lunch, right? So being with that did definitely shape me. And I remember when our school was having like different like multicultural days when I was in high school.
Yep.
I went shopping in the stores and I'm like, Mama, I can't find a Sudanese flag anywhere. Like, why can't I find a Sudanese flag in any of these shops? And she just kind of looked at me and was just like, what do you want
Yeah.
with a Sudanese flag? Like,
Yeah.
what is this? Right?
Yeah.
And for years and years, I literally could not find a Sudanese flag. And then, like, even when I would go back to Sudan, like, other than the government buildings and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
there was
Yeah.
nothing. And it took me a while to realize that Sudan and the people of Sudan are two very separate things. And the myth that we kind of have here for some of us in the diaspora is that we actually see each other as one country.
Yeah.
And
Very
when I
true.
think of colonialism and I think of like all the borders that were drawn and okay, now you're all one, here you go, here you go, here you go. And I even think about our independence, like
Mm-hmm.
our independence wasn't something that required the country to mobilize
Thank you.
together.
Yeah.
So, and so for me, I don't know if we've ever really had that modern experience of even recognizing that we're all in the same boat together.
Yeah.
And because of like how big Sudan is, like what's happening in Port Sudan versus what's happening in Darfur, what El Haifa,
Yeah.
like all of those areas, like I would go and visit my family in Umdurman. They have no clue what's happening in Darfur. No clue.
No,
No
I'm
clue.
telling you, they probably don't have a clue about what's happening in Bahti, which is across the bridge. So,
Exactly. Right.
yeah.
But I also think that that was kind of intentional because even in the TV, when we would watch it,
Mhm.
you really just kind of got whatever was in your area or whatever censored, filtered down stuff like
Yeah.
Bashir would allow.
Yeah.
So I don't really believe that there's like this Sudanese consciousness, this like
Yeah.
actual um, understanding of yes, we didn't make our borders. Like I recognize and understand that yes, we're still reaping the fall from all things related to um, that colonial
Yeah.
process. But in this landscape, in this reality,
Hmm.
those borders still mean something. And we either have to come together or we're just so easy for the picking because what's easier than a fragmented community?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, fair enough. Fair enough. If you really want to take it back to the proper roots of things in Sudan, even look at even before the colonialism by the
Mm.
British or whatever, even if you go down to the proper history.
Maybe we were colonized even before the
No, no,
British,
no,
though.
no. Even no, no, no. Even no, no, no. Even if you ignore like all of that, to me is relatively modern colonization. But if you
Yes,
go
yeah.
even like in the actual proper distant history of
Yeah.
Sudan, how
Hmm.
many kingdoms were there in
Yep.
one time in Sudan? Like there was always like two or
Yep.
three fighting for control. Though it was never like the country that is called Sudan or the kingdom that is
Yeah, that
called Sudan.
didn't exist. Yeah,
It
that was
never
not a thing.
existed. And at the same time, when you look at how Sudan that we live in today even even became the Sudan, like Sudan historically was a name for a region. It wasn't a country. It was the name for a
Mm-hmm.
region.
Hmm.
The entire like the majority of the sub-Saharan line
Was
was
Sudan.
called
Yeah.
Sudan because Sudan translates into the land of the black. That is, yeah, that is it. That is what it is. Okay,
Why
the land of the black
did
people.
we get stuck with the name?
Yeah, I mean, look, okay, so fair enough. Okay, think about it that way. Okay, so historically, that is what it was called. Okay, the land of the
Hmm.
black people. It's just like a big piece of land where like a
Hmm.
lot of black people live. And
Hmm.
then it started shrinking, not just with colonialism, but also like internal conflicts. The Christianity entered, Islam entered,
Hmm.
there became religious differences. Da, 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 da. So it's like Sudan, the region, started shrinking into Sudan, the country.
Mm.
And with it, it brought down so many different tribes, so many different backgrounds.
Hmm.
And you will find that in the western region of Sudan, we have tribes from Hausa. We have tribes from da da da.
Yeah,
These are
I'm
like,
part Fulani.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
my maternal side is
Yeah,
Fulani Hausa. My
exactly,
maternal side is
exactly.
Visaria
So
Bahara.
yeah,
Like,
so you will find that there are tribes, just using Hausa as an example. Hausa is there are tribes in Nigeria called Hausa.
mhm.
It's the same tribe with the same traditions, almost
Yeah,
give or
it went
take.
like this.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it shrunk. It came with the shrinking of the Sudan region into the Sudan country. If you go to the east, you'll find that there are a lot of tribes that have a lot of similarities in terms of culture and in terms of traditions to tribes from
Habash.
from
Yeah.
Ethiopia, from Eritrea, from all these parts. And so you'll find that Sudan as a country, it's so different
Mm.
and it's so
Mm.
diverse. But that diversity was never used properly. That
It could have
diversity,
been such a strength.
exactly. So that
Mm.
diversity was never utilized as a point of strength for the Sudanese people. It was almost intentionally on every single point, and at every single turn in Sudan's modern, ancient, whatever history, that diversity was utilized against Sudan. That diversity was used
Hmm.
like to dismantle the community more than bring it together. Even though on the small scale, you will find that people are living together peacefully. There are no issues. If you
Hmm.
take like a neighborhood as an example in Sudan, you'll find people from X tribe living next to people from the north, living next to people from the center, and life is I don't know if this is my internet or yours. Hello.